Welcome back to the Better People podcast. Today, I'm sharing part two of my conversation with Santoria Bell. Listen as we delve into many painful realities of church hurt. Again, Santoria and I have been friends for years, and so sometimes part of this podcast will seem a little chatty. But I hope that you would hear our hearts and understand our journey and maybe, just maybe, get a peek into who we are. For remember, I believe that the fastest way to understanding is by listening. Now, when I
Yeah.
got there, though, it was very, very serious, but there were some things, some key elements that I was like, yeah, but they're not doing this. But I said, but it's so good over here
Yeah.
that I could take these one or two things.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And so, and two, I was very careful about who I would say that I was submitting to. So although I
Yeah.
was really appreciated what Justin was doing and the work and
Yeah.
everything, he still was never going to be, he still hadn't become Pastor Cox to me. And I remember this man preaching about this or teaching about it or speaking to me about, yeah, people be over here, but but they won't, they just want to call me Justin. They don't want to call me Pastor Cox. I remember him saying something along those lines. But I mentioned that because that was kind of my thing. I'm assessing, 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 assessing. And he was trying
Absolutely.
to push things forward. He was
He
just
was.
trying to push it, push it, push it. And
Yeah.
now that I think about it, when I think about what you're saying in terms of how he was, setting things up well, I think the first time I preached at P4CM, I feel like he asked me the day before or the day of.
Yeah. It was like, yep. I remember that.
It was like
We
last
talked about
minute.
it. Mm-hmm.
And when I think back to that and I consider that he's making moves, that there had to be something else behind that.
100%.
Yeah, so
100%.
that's a very interesting thought. I hadn't really thought about that too much.
Yeah.
But all
Even
it
even with his attack on me with you, it was to get you plugged in because he saw you weren't sold on it.
mm-hmm,
You know?
mm-hmm,
Okay,
yeah.
go
Because he
ahead.
kept trying to get me, wanted me to consider discipling women, consider discipling this woman. We need this over here. And I was just like, and at the time, I was like, the Lord was not moving me to do that at all. I was just
Wow.
like, yeah, it's not in my heart to do. But he
Yeah.
kept saying it, but I was like, yeah. And I would take it and think about it. I'm like, the Lord was not saying yes at all.
Mm.
Like, even if I was like, it was like,
Yeah.
no, no. And it wasn't making sense because I was like, we over here every day with this lady.
Right.
I mean, all of them are. So anyway, but when to kind of lean into the idea of church hurt, I think about the impact that it had on my kids, and not just P4CM, just me running so hard the way I was running and me continuing to run into walls
Mm.
and them being with me as this was happening.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
they were impacted by all the different things that I saw because it was legitimate stuff that I was experiencing.
Mhm.
But I hadn't considered I'm running really hard for them,
Yeah,
but not really considering the impact that it was having
yeah,
on them,
yeah.
and so um so church hurt is a real thing, but at the same time, you can't avoid it.
No, 100%. 100%. Because we've come to learn because we bumped our head here and then bumped our head there and then bumped our head. It's like that is the same thing in different places. We're
Mhm.
like, okay. And I want to say this because I want to make sure to paint this picture well. Like the church where we met and got played was P4CM. It's called the Passion for Christ Movement in LA. And that thing was booming. Like if people Google it, you'll probably still see. So we were wearing these shirts, ex fornicator, ex. I always laugh because my brother wore an ex fornicator shirt to my cousin's high school graduation. Bright red, standing there hugging up. I'm like, dude, that's how hard we went.
Yeah.
Red one, hugged up in the picture with my cousin who was graduating. And I said, I'm running around LA with an ex-masturbator shirt on. Like we was sincere about that thing, you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
But I also want to say, like, when everything came crashing down, And thank the Lord, this guy who was a therapist was introduced to our ministry like a year before everything came crashing down. Because I think he was a mentor to one of the guys. He lived out of state, but one of the guys that were going to our church. His name was Gerald Thomas. When everything came crashing down, I ran to Gerald to get therapy because I was like, bro, what in the world? And one thing he said, San, he said, what's deep is, he said, there's a lot of Bible-based cults that are now on the rise. And this was our thing came crashing down, I think around 2010, wasn't it? It was like 2010, I think, the big hit happened,
I
right?
think so.
2010, 2011. He was like, there's a lot of Bible-based cults. And so let me clear, we were getting a lot of really great teaching which our pastor was able to hide behind, right? Because there were some very biblically sound things, but his actions weren't necessarily lining up. But his actions were also very like subtle and manipulative. If they weren't big, right? And then we were moving the needle so hard. Like P4CM was doing big things. We were recognized by a lot of Christian hip hop artists. They were like not only shouting out the church, some of them were stopping through. And we produced, there's a poetry thing that Ezekiel started, Ezekiel Azanwu, and he did this poem called Almost, I think it was, at our poetry event at P4CM. And out of that, he started PIA. He met all these other poets. He partnered with Genetics. He partnered with Jackie Hill Perry. He partnered with Preston Perry. Um, there was a number of people. I think Joe Solomon ended up partnering with them later, but all of that started at P4CM. So all of these people came through P4CM as well. Jackie Hill Perry, well, some people know I discipled her. She actually lived with me for 2 years. She wrote about me in her book. And I want to say that because like there was some solid work going out. Blair Lynn, it's now Blair Lynn. Her name was Blair Wingo. Blair actually started the poetry movement at our church. She was like kind of the resident poet and was going out putting P4CM on the map. Like we were this grassroots, but we were very aggressive, very focused, and very driven. Like, Justin had a bunch of workhorses committed to him, right? But a lot of people came out and up to do very big, prominent things. So
Hmm.
that just paints the picture that like, yeah, it wasn't no um this wasn't some little cute little something we was doing. Like we were trying to make an impact in a real way and were, right? So
Hmm.
much so that even when the church came crashing down, people still went on to
Hmm.
keep on going in ministry,
Yeah.
right, wrong, or indifferent. Because I
Yeah.
feel like honestly, everybody needed to sit down.
Yeah.
Like I did. I didn't realize the wisdom of it till later, um, but yeah, I just want to make that clear. And so I think I think one of the weighty things for me about spiritual abuse is how much abuse could really be happening in a situation that looks like it's producing good fruit.
Hmm. Hmm.
We got to
Hmm.
wrestle with that. And so
Yeah.
to go back to what you were saying about us hitting these walls, I think for you and I, because we've continued to pursue the Lord, we've continued to try to figure it out and adapt and readjust. And I think it's a devastating blow
Sure.
when you realize you were running so hard, you were being abused, and expecting even your abusers to at some point humble themselves and repent. That's a whole other conversation. But you learn, oh, you really ain't in it for the Lord at all because they don't humble themselves and they don't repent. Yet to see that Christianity is quite unchristian, it's whoa.
Yeah.
I'm still grappling with it.
Yeah.
But it was funny because in God's faithfulness, before I got back into ministry doing discipleship, well, like kind of at the beginning, the Lord kept telling me to like read the scriptures, focus on the life of Jesus. Read the scripture, focus on the life of Jesus. And I'm like, hey, and I did, but it didn't click till later.
Hmm.
I think the reason he did that is because Jesus, his whole ministry was with religious leaders.
Hmm. Hmm.
He's like saying, I need you to be clear.
Hmm.
This is where your fight is going to come from.
Yeah.
When you're really on assignment from me, you really surrender your heart to me, your biggest fight is going to be this system of people that are all pretending they're about me and they really ain't.
Yeah. 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 I think one of the, Darren, my son, made a huge shift in
Is
his,
that your son? Is that your son?
yes, my baby,
Like I don't know, Darren, my son.
my son, Darren, Darren Haygood.
Right.
Anyway, Darren, he, there was a point where, because he was fighting really hard, and I'm saying even after P4CM, he ended up going to school, getting his master's in divinity, and
Mhm.
he had been doing the work that he had been trained to do
Yeah.
through the scripture and in our household or whatever, running into walls, consistently running into
Mm.
walls and people and stuff. First
Yeah.
became a pastor there. He's there, and there's a funeral that needs to happen. He's the pastor of the church, and they said, "Yeah, we're not gonna want you to do this one here." And he was like, "Well, why?" It was the story may be a little different, but the point is still the same. No, someone didn't want him to do it, was kind of trying
Mm.
to protect him from even thinking that he should do it.
Mm.
And the reason why was because the person who died was a racist. And so they wouldn't want the black pastor to do the funeral.
Mm.
And that was a moment for
Mm.
me that not
Mm.
only does this man die a racist, but his family still supports his ideology
Mm.
to the point that the
In a
pastor
church.
in the church, to the point that the pastor of this church can't even do the funeral and is still supported. And I
Wow.
thought, this is wild. I just couldn't really even understand it. But Darren had to grapple with the reality that not only racist people, but
Uh-huh.
all kind of people
Mm.
will still enter into heaven. That's what he had. He said, Mom, because he
Mm.
had to go, if these people can,
Mm-hmm.
despite their behavior, based
Mm.
on their belief,
Mm-hmm.
and but this one blind spot, like is this one blind
Yeah.
spot going to keep them out? And he
Yeah.
goes, this is their blind spot.
Yeah.
Because of their training, because of how
Yeah.
they were raised, because of
Yeah.
how they've been trained to see it. And so when
Yeah.
we look over at how we've been trained
Yeah.
and how we have blind spots
Yeah.
and how we taught and trained people in those blind spots, he said, Mom, I'm going to have to accept that there will be some racist people in that. And
Wow.
I said, when you first told me that, I said, no, baby, I'm so sorry, but that's not
Right.
that. But when you
Right.
really think about it, everyone is, if there are sins that are being covered,
Huh.
we just put them up higher than others.
Yeah. No, that's real. That's real.
And when he said that, it I knew it changed him, but it changed me in the
Mm.
sense that it made me have compassion for ignorance.
Mm. Right.
And it doesn't give anybody an excuse,
Yeah.
but it made me have compassion for ignorance because I have to acknowledge mine, especially
Yeah.
in the context of my ignorance hurt people.
Yeah. And so, okay, so let me be clear. So he thinks, so he's saying people will die that are racist and make it into heaven.
Mhm,
Ooh.
mhm. He and I and worked with Dr. Jerry Taylor with the Carl Spain Center
Mm.
it was basically race reconciliation. So we
Okay.
would go and communicate to people, professors, pastors. We would have prayer meetings, um, conferences, and we would bring pastors and educators there and give them information about racism, white supremacy, its
Yeah.
impact on Black people.
Yeah.
And there was several goals. I can say my goal was to give you this information so that when you're leading your congregations, that
Mhm.
you are completely informed.
Yep.
That it's not just, what you think is happening. So we were reading books.
Yeah.
We were going on tours. We
Yeah.
were
Yeah.
taking
Yeah.
them through,
I kind of
just
remember that.
And so we were doing those things to give these people some perspective. Well, Darren also did this when he became a pastor over here. He took these people through reading all type of different things
Yeah,
about the Black history.
yeah,
They were able to understand things because they were able to ask questions. They were in
yeah.
small group, but there was so much pushback against it. But
Wow.
for him, he was like, Mom, but these people are loving people. They
Mm,
are loving people. They sacrifice their time, their
mm,
money. They will
mm.
do, whatever they can to help. Now, but when it came down to this,
Yeah.
the training was so
Oh, I get it.
deep
I get it.
that he could recognize this is their blind spot.
Look, I have so much stuff to say about that, but I don't want to derail us. So we're gonna put a pin in it. Cause
Hmm.
I feel him in general. It's like that aha moment is like, oh, like there are walls set up in a Christian context that just are what they are.
Yeah, yeah.
And yeah, I agree with that.
Because one of the things too, when Rudy and I started leading church,
Mhm.
um, we had heard that just a few pastors before us that whenever a Black person would come into the congregation, they wouldn't extend the invitation. So if someone was in the audience and they were Black, the invitation was not going to be extended because they did not want anybody Black to come to this church.
Wow, no. And see, for me, I'm like, Lord, you see that. You see these systems that are putting your name on them that don't have your heart, right? And I'm like, is that a situation where, like the book of Revelations, when he's talking to the church of Ephesus, and he's like, man, you love these people. You give them your money. You la 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 la. But he's like, but I have this one thing against you. You were racist, right? Like in my mind, that's how
Hmm.
it goes. Like if you
Hmm.
and so it's like you can I was just watching this clip of this woman talking about Mother Teresa. And you know how she's this like it's just like these systems have been in place for so long. She is just well respected, beloved. And I think you and I would really remember her because she was like a big thing like in our generation,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
She's just like this like a saint. You know,
Hmm.
she's going to these poor places and she did a lot of work, I believe, in India. And she's just praying with them and seeing about them. And she's building facilities to house these people that are, sick and all of those things. So come to find out, though, she thought there was a beauty in suffering. So really being around them was about almost this idolatry towards suffering more so than her actually providing relief. So much so that what this video was saying is that um, in her hospitals, they would have medication to
Hmm.
ease people's pain, but she would encourage the staff not to give them the medication because the suffering was beautiful.
Mm, mm,
And
mm,
so and this happened for years. This woman was bringing in hundreds of millions, or they said tens of millions of dollars in donations to be able to have what was needed. She would erect these hospitals, but they really weren't taking care of them at all. It would just be in people in there sitting, watching them die in excruciating pain, oftentimes. And she would just be like, just pray with them.
mm,
She is the on, however, on the other hand, when she was sick and her body started breaking down. She went to one of the top hospitals in California, and that's where she spent her last days. She didn't
mm,
go to not one of them clinics
mm,
she
mm,
erected,
mm,
where a lot of
mm,
times they said she didn't even have real medical staff. It
mm,
wasn't real, like doctors and nurses. It was just like, hospice care workers or I don't even know, maybe chaplains or you know what I'm saying, but it wasn't legit medical staff.
mhm,
And someone has come forward that worked under her and said, no, she would actually encourage us not to give them medication, like not to do anything to make them comfortable, oh, Cherie.
mm,
This woman is known as a saint to give hope, love, support, encouragement to those suffering and poor people, but really not so. Then she had a lot of alliances with like dictators and like a lot of evil leaders throughout the world during her time.
mhm,
And I say that because when she died, there was this all these marches in the street, and it was a big thing. It was all over the news, if you remember. It was all this celebration. But I'm like, for me, I have to believe that God will be like, they celebrating you. But I know, like man looks at the outward appearance, God looks at that. I know who you are.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, ma'am.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
No, ma'am.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And so will the person that so people like us, we've definitely offended some people, we've definitely hurt some people, but we've repented of that and aligned ourselves with the Lord, and we get in, right? Or even the murderer that ultimately changes his perspective, and repents, puts his faith in Jesus, and like lets go of that,
Mm-hmm.
he'll get in. But girl, I'm gonna have to chew on
She
that.
said, I ain't going for that. I'm not with
No,
that right there.
because
I'm
I'm
gonna
like that bumps up against his justice. But like that's what I
I'll
said.
tell you why it
Go.
caused me to bend a bit and just
Yeah,
and caused me to look in.
yeah,
Because what I recognized in myself when he
yeah.
said this was that their behavior was creating a racist in me. Right. I was like, I
Ooh,
said, because what I found myself, I would be like, oh, how can you treat us like this? How can you see us this way?
sure.
How can you receive this information and still hold to that? Right.
Yeah,
They may have some justifiable reasons because I was finding my justifiable reasons for why I was.
I feel you. I see what
Right.
you mean. Yep.
And so I thought, oh wow, I started thinking about the development, like how you you train up a child in the way that they should go.
Hmm.
That's just a principle. That's a basic human principle that's
Hmm.
happening, whether someone's told you to do that or not.
Hmm.
Whatever the child is receiving, they are becoming something.
Hmm.
And so, yes, they must face it and see it.
Yeah.
But the truth of the matter is, 70% of white Americans could easily never engage a black person as a
Girl, I
person.
know. Hmm.
And so they're never confronted with it.
Hmm.
They're confronted with some hate in their own life.
Hmm.
So anyway, it just made me kind of back up and go, okay, Sheree. And
Like
because
consider it.
I had to consider it from a different lens. So I remember we were in a prayer group praying very specifically as it relates to race. And we really was asking God to, break these chains and recognizing that a lot of demonic forces were behind, this racist way in which the Americas have been set up. And I was sitting next to this
Hmm.
guy, and he said, he's confessing. He says, I'm a racist,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
he's sitting next to me, and he says, and I'm like, wow, he's acknowledging that. That's awesome. Right. And then
Hmm.
he hit it again. I'm a racist. I was like, yeah, he really feeling this or whatever. And this man said it so many times. I said, hold on, brother.
Are you trying to hold on to it?
Hold on. We good. I heard you. I heard you the first time. Goodness, what are we doing here?
What are we doing?
So we kind of laughed and, chuckled or whatever. And so he's confessing something, but then later on we had a conversation uh that weekend or on another retreat or whatever. And I was telling him, I was like, I've been really praying for my father because my father was born and raised in Texas. And he was um he was almost killed at the hands of white people and he's seen a lot of things.
Yeah.
And he goes, oh, he just needs to forgive. So he just needs to forgive.
Uh,
Like from his lens,
uh,
it's just as simple as just forgive.
right.
And there wasn't any real because he was not able to recognize the humanity of this
Oh, for
person.
sure. Yeah. Yeah.
And I had told many stories about what my father had experienced, but for
Yeah.
him, he just needs to forgive and just accept Jesus as Lord. But he can't even see Jesus.
Sure.
And so now
Sure.
what's going to happen to my father?
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so now what's going to happen? All of what
Yeah.
you've done church hurt because
Yeah.
my father was raised by Christians.
Mm.
And he said, oh no, I'm out of here.
Yeah. And that piece, I think I will forever um be devastated about, right? Like the evil that persists in Christians and Christian spaces.
Mhm.
Because Um, yeah, I think you had asked me some questions, and I was like, for me, bumping into the wall, bumping into the wall, bumping into the wall. And then it's like, oh, the system's corrupt. Oh, so now let me recognize that I can't put any confidence in the system to be well and even want to be well, to be honest, because for the most part it doesn't want to be, right? And so my wrestle is to stand for the Lord but against and apart from the system that says they actually stand for the Lord, which is crazy. But but I see that clearly now. A hard pill to swallow, but a necessary pill to swallow if I want to try to actually endure in the way that I've been convicted to endure to the end, right? Like I have to. So then for me in my mind, I go back to the scriptures that talks about the path being narrow. So I shouldn't be surprised. Jesus was attacked by religious leaders all the time. So, all right, religious leaders gonna attack me. Like when I started seeing like not what I hoped it to be, but what it really was, and comparing it to what the Lord laid out in the word, I'm like, oh, dang, you actually were warning me. Like, this is going to be hard. And a lot of people ain't going to make it in because they're not going to want to really walk according to the spirit. It's going to be way easier to just give into the system and go with that, you know?
When you talk about the system, it's a very, I can hear what you're saying. I see what you're saying, and I recognize, that there's a distinction, and maybe you can define what you mean by system.
Yeah.
But prior to that, I read this book. It's called The Christian Imagination,
Mm,
and I'm not sure if we've talked about this in the past before, but in the Christian imagination,
mhm,
these Christians went over and uh, took 25 boys from Africa and brought them to the shores of Portugal. And when they
mhm.
got here, they tied two boys to the church. And
Yeah.
they did it in the name of God. And their goal was that we would take these uncivilized people, these
Mhm,
animals, because they did say that Africans were not human, that we
mhm,
would take them and we would bring them here, and their children's may accept Jesus one day. So in
mm,
their minds, they were animals first, and
mhm.
then over time, I guess they would become civilized. But ultimately, it made no sense at all.
Yeah.
But that was what was happening. This was the foundation of what was happening. So they
Yep.
called these boys black gold. And so all of these rich people are standing on the shores waiting for them to come off the ships. And it wasn't just the behavior. It wasn't just that, oh, you would take them and bring them somewhere. But it was the mindset, the Christian imagination that
Oh, yeah.
said, thank you, God, for this black gold, and we're going to tithe it.
100%.
And the reason why I bring that up is because how often are we in our own Christian imagination
Hmm.
about the things of God?
Hmm.
That too, kind of leaning into what Darren said, like these men truly, they're doing this in the name of God.
For sure.
And then they're also saying, and then later on, we're going to bring fruit. We're going to bring people to the Lord by
Yeah.
way of this behavior
Yeah.
and fully engaged in it from a false understanding,
Yeah.
of
Yep.
God, even.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
so when I say I'm mentioning that in light of the system, people are delusional.
For sure.
Yeah, they
For
have this
sure.
illusion of Christianity and are moving along the path.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? So when you I
Hmm.
mentioned that, I'm inserting that there, but also, wondering too, when you see the system, when you think about
Yeah.
the system, what is how would you define this system that you're talking about?
So I'm gonna start with this. I think because this was the point I had initially. I believe after the consistent attack on me, Satan's goal is to try to get me to question if God is good, which is literally what he did to Adam and Eve in the garden, right? It was like I remember reading this one pastor said the way he tempted Eve was around like, is he withholding something from you? Right. And so in everything that I endured, it was always like, man, God, how could you allow this to happen? How could they do this to me? Why would they do this to me? Blah, 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 blah. And for a lot of people that went through what I have, they've left the faith. I get it, right? Or they're agnostic, or they're caught up in something else that's not connected to the Lord, but they're like in a different spiritual practice altogether. But I believe that that's really what the enemy wants, right? And so when I say the system, I say the system that says that they represent God, but they're actually a Pharisee that went against Jesus, right? When you look at the comparison of how Jesus walked and how the Pharisees walked, there was a distinction in that Pharisees would walk with this distinction of knowledge, and they had an air about them, and there was this pomp, and there was this all this procedure and technique, and just very polished and upright and articulate and blah 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 blah, but they had no heart for people for real.
Mm-hmm.
And meanwhile, Jesus comes and basically upsets the entire apple cart of the system
Mm-hmm.
by not being, he's like nomadic. He ain't really got nowhere that he lived for real, for real.
Mm-hmm.
He's
Mm-hmm.
preaching to people and they ain't bring no food. Like Jesus, you knew he was coming out here. Why you ain't had to bring them? So he's got to stretch these fishes and loaves.
Mm-hmm.
Like the whole way that he's moving, when you watch his life, it's so different from the system we put in place and call Christianity. So really it just has, when I say the system, it's having this presentation of God, but not having a real heart for people. Now,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you can actually have a heart for people. I don't care how much you say you love and you give him money, but if at the end of the day you don't see racism as bad, I question your heart for people. And I get that you've been discipled or raised in a context that makes you think this is biblical. But I also think that God is faithful to like expose our hearts the more that we surrender to him, right? Even for me, I told you about the scenario where I had to fly out to check on one of my disciplees, right? And she is in this just really bad, what do I even say, Christian context. It's very unhealthy. It's legalism. It's all the things, right? And I remember flying out there and I was talking to the Lord and I was like, okay. I was like, let me know what I need to do. And the Lord was like, listen, don't walk in with Santoria's bravado. I need you to just take your time, submit to my spirit, and like let me guide you on how you're to move. And the reason I established that is because what I found is that the way Jesus walked, he walked in this gray where you couldn't quite call him bad and you didn't really want to call him good because it seemed to go so against the grain. It's like, what the heck are you doing? But because he was so perfectly settled in the spirit of God, he was able to navigate these spaces in a way that would throw everybody off unless they actually had the faith to see it, right? And so what I mean is the
You've been listening to part 2 of this conversation. Go and subscribe so that you would be one of the first to know when part 3 drops.